Hello, everybody. My name is Jerome Gabriel, and I am a faculty member at the University of St. Francis in Joliet, Illinois, in the Recreation and Sport Management Department, and my specialty is outdoor recreation and being outside. I've had the opportunity over the years to both work in and train a large number of people in the outdoors, and one of the things that I often find is that students are really interested in going into the outdoor recreation field, but they often think that means that they're just going to be going outside to play for a living. And while there is a lot of interaction outside, and I've always enjoyed doing that myself, there's really a lot more that goes into being a leader in the outdoors. And so what I wanted to do is just make this video as an opportunity to share with you a little bit more of what it's like to be a leader in the outdoors. What is it like when you are in charge of a group of people for an extended period of time outside? Give you a little bit more realistic view on what to expect, and hopefully maybe even answer some of the questions that you had about what it would be like to work outside. So to start with, I should just introduce myself a little bit. As I mentioned, my name is Jerome Gabriel, and my background has been working in the outdoors for almost 2 decades. I started off as a professional guide out in the Canadian Rockies, taking people up mountains, down rivers, through forests, caves, rappelling over cliffs. It was a lot of fun. I got to see some absolutely amazing places all over the country. Uh, After a few years of doing that, I moved to Bowling Green State University in Ohio, where I became the outdoor program director. And so for about a decade, my job was whitewater rafting, canoeing, kayaking, rock climbing, caving, rappelling, and most importantly, taking college students out on all of those trips. So I got to help them, many for the first time, experience some of the most awesome places in the outdoors. In the fall of 2014, I came to the University of St. Francis, and I have been teaching outdoor recreation ever since. So now my job is still to take a lot of people outdoors, but more so to train them to be the next generation of leaders in the outdoors. It's been a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed it. And so what I want to do is share with you a little bit of some of my experiences in doing so. So a couple of the things that I want to mention that I'm not really going to talk a lot about is, yeah, there's lots of things that I do on a daily basis outside, but some of the most important skills that I know and that I use on a daily basis, it's theory. So I realize for some people, theory is not the most exciting or awe-inspiring thing, but when you learn to lead outdoors, what I found is that knowing and understanding some basic leadership theory has been quintessential to me being successful in the outdoors. Leadership development theory and situational leadership theory. Uh, Understanding that as situations change, your leadership style needs to change. I've met a whole lot of students who early on in the process think of themselves as one type of leader. This is the way I lead. This is always the type of way I'm going to lead. And the fact is that just doesn't work very well outside. In fact, you really have to be flexible, and you have to be able to adapt and change to the situation. So I really like the Hershey and Blanchard situational leadership model. It's a basis for a lot of what I use. In addition, group development theory is probably, if not the top, then very close to the second most important theory that I know of. Understanding that a group of people, when you work with them over an extended period of time, they change. And that change and that development happens, and as it happens, you have to recognize it and change the style of leadership that you choose. So as groups change, they become more independent. They be able to work and do things on their own. And the reality is they don't need you that much. And so if you're still trying to micromanage, if you're still trying to tell them what to do over time, it can become really frustrating and actually have a pretty detrimental effect on the group. Other things like organizational development and logistical planning, program development, evaluation, data gathering, research, these are all things that are incredibly important to an outdoor leader, knowing how to lead, knowing how to develop his or her own skills, how to be able to utilize them in the outdoors, and how to develop and get better over time. But like I said, these aren't things that I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about, but I wanted to throw them out there right at the very beginning so that everybody realizes that even though I'm going to tell a lot of stories about individual experiences, overall, having this knowledge and this background is essential to being able to be a good leader in the outdoors. So most of my outdoor leadership experience that I'm going to highlight comes from trips that I've led, or what I'm going to call guiding. Now that could be professional guiding, like when I was up in the Rockies. That could have been guiding and teaching, whereas what I did mostly when I was at Bowling Green, taking students out for the first time in a lot of different places. Or it could be educational guiding, which is really what I do now, in taking students into natural spaces, but teaching them how to lead in those positions. So I'm going to draw from a number of those different experiences and tell a lot of different stories along the way, but just to highlight some of the places where these experiences have happened. So for me, one of my favorite activities is vertical stuff. So learning how to rappel and teaching rappelling. I did a lot of this in British Columbia, Canada. Part of it isn't just I'm teaching people how to go over the cliffs, but I also spend a lot of time educating people on the physics and the dynamics of it. So if you thought leadership was all just about taking people into the outdoors and making sure they have a good experience, that's true, but you also have to have a lot of technical skill knowledge. So in this case, I'm teaching students how to tie wrap 3 pull 2 anchors and the breaking strength of 1-inch tubular webbing and vectors, and how increasing the vector angle increases the amount of force on the attachment point. These are all things that you might not really think about, but physics plays a really large role in a lot of things that are done on rope or with technical equipment. So yeah, outdoor recreation is great, but also not only adding in some theory, but also adding in some understanding of physics is a big part of it. Rock climbing is another sport that I really enjoy. Being able to take people outside, being able to have that physical interaction with the rock is something that has always been an interest of mine. I really personally enjoyed doing a lot of rock climbing as well. And then again, teaching people is a big part of what I do. So helping people to understand the risk management involved in it and the safety involved in it. So I have to understand theory. I have to understand even some basic physics involved, but I also have to know about risk management and how to apply that risk, how to teach it, so that way people understand and don't do things that could potentially get them injured. Caving is by far my favorite outdoor activity, and it's been that way for years. This particular picture is of a rappel that I do almost every year with my students at University of St. Francis. It's called Stevens Gap. It's a cave in Alabama. On that rope in that picture is actually one of my students from a spring break trip. So caving is such a unique activity because the type of people who typically excel at a lot of the other activities, type of people who are physically strong and physically able to carry a large load, able to pull themselves up the rock, they can typically excel at backpacking or even the whitewater trips, or definitely the rock climbing style trips. But in caving, oftentimes we're looking to try to explore some small and unique areas in a cave. And sometimes being big and strong is actually a detriment in those areas. So having somebody size doesn't really matter all that much. In fact, a lot of it has to do more with mental status and mental strength. Claustrophobia and those sorts of things can often happen when caving as well. When we do these high angle caving trips where we do the big rappels, a fear of heights comes in a lot of the time. So being able to help people work through those fears and work through that anxiety is a lot of what I do. Caving is just a great opportunity for me to be able to take people in and also teach them a little bit about the geology of it. So sure, I have to know some physics, I have to know some risk management, but when I'm doing caving, I also have to understand geology. I have to understand the way in which caves form, phreatic versus vadose caves, different types of stalactites versus stalagmites, other speleothems, understanding cave biology as well. So again, it's not just about outdoor recreation, but I'm trying to share with you some of the other knowledge that you really have to be successful in this field. Backpacking is kind of a common activity that we all really enjoy doing. It's an easy way to get into the outdoors, to take people outside, and it's often, for especially my students, their first adventure into the outdoors. To be able to spend a couple nights out alone in the woods with just your tent and your sleeping bag and some food gives people an opportunity to really get away from everything. So in terms of skill, there's not a whole lot of skill necessary in learning how to backpack. Most of it has to do with some minor technical skills, such as how to pack your pack, how to do food planning and rationing, how to use and maintain some of the equipment. But it's a great entry-level activity for a lot of people getting into the outdoors. I've gotten the opportunity to backpack in a number of different areas. The first picture you saw there was from some of my time on the Appalachian Trail in North Carolina. This particular picture is from the Escalante Grand Staircase region in Utah, just outside of Escalante. And it's a beautiful desert area. Part of learning how to backpack in these areas and how to explore these areas is also learning about the flora and the fauna, the plants and the animals that exist in these areas. When we do backpacking trips in desert regions, one of the unique things that we always have to keep in mind is Cryptosporidium. It's a kind of a bacterial colony that grows in the sand, but it grows very slowly. So if you walk through it, in these desert regions, one of the things we have to be concerned with is cryptobiotic crust. And so understanding that this is an organism that takes a really long time to grow, and that length of time it takes to grow can be impeded by somebody walking through it. So again, some basic flora or fauna that you might need to know about going into one of these areas. Canoeing, again, very low impact, good entry level activity, where most of the skills necessary are going to be, again, more technical skills. So learning particular paddling strokes, learning how to portage a canoe, those sorts of things. And then kayaking falls in kind of that same realm. I really enjoy being on the water a lot and understanding, again, basic kayaking skills, whether that is your strokes or even doing a roll. These are certain technical skills that eventually you develop over time. So with all of that, that's kind of the technical and background skill that you need going into becoming an outdoor leader. But when you're actually out there leading a group of people in the outdoors, what happens? Well, to begin with, you're their family when you're out there. People have good days, people have bad days. You're really there to support them. You're there to help them, especially if you're working with younger age individuals or even up to college students. Sometimes they just need to talk. They want to share their experiences, both their highs and their lows. And you, as an outdoor leader, have to be there for them throughout that process. But when you're in the outdoors, you're also their chef. So learning how to cook in the outdoors is an essential skill. Being able to develop not only a meal plan, being able to understand the amount of food that's being purchased and how to organize that food, and then simply being able to cook it. There are some individuals who lead in the outdoors who do a great job of burning water, and that's about the limit of their cooking experience. Most good outdoor leaders have a good repertoire of meals that they can prepare on a regular basis and be able to maintain those meals for a group of 1 or 2 people up to a group of 10 to 20 people. Learning how to cook and how to provide food can make a really bad day really good with a good meal, but it can also make a day that had been going really well pretty bad if the food is bad. So understanding how to cook and those cooking skills are an essential piece of when you're leading outdoors. When you're in the outdoors, you're also a teacher. You are not only explaining kind of the plan for the day and what needs to be happening, but you're going to be teaching basic skills to these individuals. And that might be something as simple as setting up a camp stove or setting up a tent or choosing the right campsite, to more technical skills like how to set up rappelling anchors and how to do a crossbow draw in a canoe. And these are all essential skills that you need to know and have a good enough working knowledge of it yourself, so that way you can teach it to other people. Sometimes teaching, especially if you're working in a university setting, might also be teaching some of this basic theory. So learning enough about group development theory or situational leadership or any of the other multitude of leadership theories that are out there in order to be able to apply it in these outdoor settings and show the people that you're leading how these are taking place during their experience. One of the other basic jobs you have is being a mechanic. So things break outdoors. Things are always going to break, whether that is learning how to use zip ties to pull back together a backpack, or whether that's learning how to use your pocket knife to completely dismantle a stove in the field and fix it, whether that is figuring out how to replace all of the cooking utensils that somehow got lost along the way. As a outdoor leader, you have to have some creativity, you have to have some problem-solving skills, and you have to have a good working knowledge of all of the equipment that you're taking out there, and how would you repair it to make it functional again. Really, this just comes with practice. Uh, my biggest recommendation, always have zip ties and duct tape with you. Zip ties and duct tape, and you can take care of a lot of things in the outdoors. In the outdoors, one of the things to also consider is that, especially in remote settings, you are the medical provider on that trip. So while you're not necessarily a full doctor and you're not going to be prescribing medication, if somebody gets injured, you're going to have to treat them. Now, sometimes we might not think of injuries as that big of a deal. If you're at the local park playing basketball and you trip over somebody and roll your ankle and it pops, well, you limp back to your car and somebody drives you over to the hospital, they check it out, they put you in a boot for a few weeks. But what happens if that same rolled ankle happens, but you are 3 days out in the boundary waters in northern Minnesota, and you still have to hike a number of portage trails with your canoe to get out? Well, now all of a sudden that rolled ankle becomes a much bigger deal. So how do you treat it? What can you do for that person? How can you change the trip in order to modify the experience so that way they can still have a good experience but also get out safely? And that's where your medical training comes in, whether that's basic wilderness first aid, becoming a wilderness first responder, or even becoming a wilderness EMT. And these are all options that you have as an outdoor leader to be able to train on the medical side, because when injuries and issues occur out there, you have to be the one to treat them. So understanding basic medicine is also a big skill in the outdoors. And then finally, one of the other things that you may not even think about is being in the outdoors means you're often a counselor. This has been an experience that I have had a number of times, especially leading groups, namely college students. When people get into these outdoor settings, they feel fairly comfortable, they feel safe, and they see you as somebody that they can often trust. Uh, in many cases, for me personally, this has led to some really difficult conversations with people. People sharing things with me that they probably hadn't shared with anybody else, whether that is family issues, whether that's things like sexual assaults, deaths, attempted suicides, self-harming, some pretty deep and emotional things. And for somebody who's working in the outdoors, I know my first time one of these conversations came up, I wasn't ready for it. I didn't realize that this was something that might happen. Now, since then, I've had more experience and I've actually spent time personally getting more training in it, teaching myself and finding opportunities to learn more about counseling and learning more about helping people through tragedy and through anxiety and through tough times. Uh, Working in the outdoors means you're probably going to be exposed to some of these, I would call them opportunities to be there for other people and to help them through these difficult times. So it might not be what you were expecting when you're in the outdoors. The first time you're leading a trip and somebody gets too stressed out that they have a mental breakdown, how do you handle that? Are you ready to handle that? These are sorts of questions that you kind of have to ask yourself and make sure that you've got the training and the knowledge to be able to handle these stressful situations, especially on these extended trips. When you're out in an area far from other assistance, you're going to be the one in charge and you're going to be the one who needs to help those people. So do you have the right training and experience to do so? Then finally, above all, you're their friend. You're out there to help them have a good time. They're out there because they love the outdoors and they want to get to know more about it. You're out there because you love the outdoors and you want to have a great experience too. So never forget when you're leading a group of people outside that you don't have to remain disconnected from them. You can be part of the group. You can get to know them on a personal level, share with them your experiences as well, and it's okay to be their friend when you're leading them outside. So who chooses to go into something like this? Well, if you're somebody who likes to be outside, you're somebody who likes people, you like to help others change, you like to help them have new experience. Are you somebody who's responsible, somebody who is willing to take on the role of responsibility for others? And above all, do you like a challenge? Do you like being in a unique environment that's constantly changing? Well, then working in the outdoors is something you might be interested in. One of the things that I always told people when I was training them to work in the outdoors is that last quote here. You can be taught every skill that you need to be in the outdoors, but unless you have the right personality that helps support that type of leadership, then it's going to be hard. Make sure you're somebody who likes people. Make sure you're somebody who wants to see people succeed, and you can't be in it for yourself. I don't know how many trips I've led where I never got to summit the mountain, or I never got to paddle the biggest rapid because my group couldn't do it. So make sure you're in it for the right reason, and hopefully this has given you a little bit of an idea of what it's like to lead outdoors.